Lights out, spot on. Here we are, back after lunch. Thank you for being in time. Thank you, panelists, for already being installed. And I already spoke a little bit with them. They're well motivated to continue our discussion on the Green Deal and now. I think that's with an exclamation mark and a question mark. So lots of ideas and lots of energy to make a fast forward or look forward to what's going to happen maybe under a new commission, to see what we do with the great output that has been created the last year under the current von der Leyen Commission. I just this morning heard that Mrs. von der Leyen is having a high-level meeting today with the agricultural sector, which connects perfectly with what we discussed this morning, but also leads in a little bit to what some of our speakers will say here. Maybe also a small reflection from my side. But before I do that, I will briefly say who I am. Jan Mollema, Benelux Union. You heard a few words on it before. I have the pleasure to lead the strategy department at the Benelux Union, and the three countries work closely together on the topic we are going to discuss today. So within the Meuse-Rhine area, on energy topics, on transport topics, and also on circular economy. I think 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if we would have been sitting here talking about energy, we would have been talking about how can we optimize the markets, how can we converge price levels. That was the most important thing, and how can we make the internal market for Europe work. And we came a far way with that. But look at us here today. It's a fully different mindset. We have had, or we are in the middle of a climate transition. We have had, of course, a war at the borders of our European Union that has created an energy crisis, which we have managed in many ways, but which we are managing and struggling with still. And those two things give us an enormous challenge in what is the topic of this discussion, to decarbonize our energy system, at the same time try to do that with our own resources and, interesting component, also with our own technology. Can we do that? That's the question. And can we do that in time? Do we want to completely become self-sufficient in this? I will put the question to the speakers here today. I'm curious to hear. Let me introduce the speakers briefly to you. Before I introduce these speakers, I have to apologize, Mrs. Hahn. She was all ready to come, but her daughter fell ill this morning, so she is excused in that sense, but she is very much thinking along in terms of this discussion, and will surely reconnect to the organizations. On our outer right, Mr. Núñez de Almeida, director at DG Grow, focusing on mobility and energy. After him, we have the private business, Mr. Jan-Jacob Boom-Wiggers from Holo Solis. I'm sure you can say that more eloquently, which is a new big company with a large investment starting up in the Grand Est on photovoltaic. Next to him, we have Maximine Charpentier, coming from the Grand Est and presiding the Chambre des Agriculteurs là-bas, and Andreas Lemmer, who is adjunct head of the State Institute for Agricultural Technique and Bioenergy in Baden-Württemberg. Herzlich willkommen. Und last but not least, Viola Rocher von der BDEW. Und vielleicht lasse ich ihn das selbst erklären. Wasser- und Energieindustrie. Eine Frage vorweg und vielleicht gleichzeitig die Einladung an Sie, sich kurz vorzustellen.
First of all, a question to you, Ms. Viola.
Context in Brussels, where the European Union is very important, but at the same time, we heard it in the last panel, regional cooperation across borders is also something that is needed to make the new economy work, to make new energy systems work. How are you trying to work over borders? How are you trying to work together to make energy decarbonization reality? And tell us, of course, in a few lines also what your organization is standing for. The floor is yours, Viola.
Ja, ich hoffe, es funktioniert. Ja, okay.
Okay, I hope this is working. Thank you to have invited me to this panel discussion. BDEW is for the German Association of Energy and Water Industries. So we represent the energy and water industries of Germany. We have more than 2,000 members from energy companies and small municipalities that manage energy systems. We want to build a global perspective, an integrated perspective on the energy transition. And we're working with different companies on this. To answer your question, how do we work together? Well, we're well organized, especially across borders. We have a bureau here at the heart of Europe that I manage. We have 7 employees that I manage. And our objective is really to manage cross-border cooperation, to work with different stakeholders, with different associations. We are part of an umbrella organization, a European umbrella organization regarding electricity production. We're also part of the gas-producing umbrella organization. And many of our members are public enterprises, public companies for service procurement. Water management is also integrated for historical reasons. So we're facing common challenges with the climate change. There's also historic reasons. So there was a merger between the gas and water companies back in the day. Thank you. It was very interesting. So as you explained, water is the next big thing in
Rhine-Meuse Forum. We have had Christmas days behind us where water played again a big role in organizing our logistic and whatever comes with it. But let's not focus on that. Let's not even focus on hydrogen for the time being, because we had a good forum here already a year ago on hydrogen. But Andreas Lemmer, if I can move over to you. You are leading a state institute on the specific topic of agriculture, engineering and bioenergy. What is the add-on your organization can bring in this discussion?
Ja, vielen Dank auch für die Einladung zu diesem Panel.
Thank you for inviting me to this panel. We are looking to convert biomass with the objective of creating biogas and production units for bioenergy. That is what we're aiming for. So converting biomass opens a whole realm of possibilities for us. There's a number of products that can be derivated from this raw material. And this is not bearing in mind the water contribution, the use of water in these value chains. Once again, we're trying to integrate the value chain and secondary products. We want to optimize the efficiency of our value chains, of our production chains, biomass, biogas, and carbon capture capacities, or rather, we need gas capacities for transport to stabilize our electric networks and our energy networks. We need to create value production chains, conversion units, even for different types of products. All these elements need to be brought together to create materials, raw materials that can be used by industry.
rede nicht so häufig und regelmäßig vielleicht in Brüsseler Foren darüber.
So we can close a cycle. Hydrogen is a major topic for us. How can we use this form of energy currently? So we're talking about the electrification of our energy use. All this takes a lot of time. In regards to biogas, to bioenergy, can we already use this? We talked about fertilizers. Can we already use these products? For instance, in the transport sector, for instance, there are 740 tons of CO2 per year, so 740 million tons of CO2, 28% of which are generated by buses and heavy goods transport. So there won't be any electromobility for LGVs and lorries. Different organizations, part of our association, are using our technology to produce biomethane, with the possibility of using derivatives for our vehicle fleet. And these types of fuels have a very positive carbon impact. We are creating bioethanol from organic fertilizers. This is a lot way more interesting than having electricity use. So their environmental footprint is actually better than the electrification of certain vehicles. Our missions are manifold. We need to finance fuel, we need to finance transition, we need to finance different measures. And the price is similar to fossil fuels. So today, the vehicles, so these adapted vehicles are a little bit more expensive than traditional conventional vehicles. So we already have the infrastructure for small cars, for passenger vehicles, and if we can ramp up our bioethanol production, then we really have a solution. But we are working within the framework of European directives that constrain certain bioethanol uses. So we're hindered by these directives. So the technology exists, so Europe has to adapt its rules to enable us to develop this technology.
En fait, ce matin, on a entendu, dans le Grand Est, il y a un programme de...
In the Grand East region, there's an experiment with 150 farms. Are you part of that experiment? And perhaps my second question, we need to be supported by the public, but also from the farming community. In France, do you see that positive development of this technology? If, for instance, we've seen in Germany and the Netherlands farmer protests. This is quite a long question, but I see that you already have an answer. Okay.
Président de la Chambre régionale d'agriculture et puis membre du bureau des chambres d'agriculture France chargé de l'innovation, recherche et développement.
6 years ago, we bought an old airstrip, which we developed to an innovation hub in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. How can we go from a fossil-based economy to a decarbonated economy? The difference between both is that the first is based on distributors that take a cut, a margin within the distribution networks, and all the products that we buy, basically there's been an intermediate who's taken a cut in the share of the profit. So what we're trying to achieve with the bioeconomy is to change the model, and we can achieve this when we have regional models. So territory or region is a really important concept here. And this is true in the Rhine region, in the Grand East region. We see everywhere we need to bring together raw materials with its use. So according to the raw materials available within a climatic context, well, we'll find an industrial solution. So sometimes we have methanization because we have a certain type of culture that will allow us to produce biomethanol or methane. We work with the principle of biorefineries. Both industries can share with the Agenda 2030 in France. We are making a number of experiences trying to produce hydrogen through biomethane. So we try to capture the carbon that we mix with the residue of and we can create carbon sinks. This will help us avoid using fossil fuel-based carbon. We actually create carbon sinks, carbon capture possibilities. So we use residue, a digestate that can be enriched, and using photosynthesis is the best way to capture carbon, because if you have a well-fertilized soil, it will capture a lot more carbon. So when you say that if you put residue within a biomethanizer, you're actually contributing to reducing CO2. But we need to experiment with these technologies. We need to prove it scientifically. And I think that everyone will be right. And I appreciate what you're saying. But if, as a farmer, I can't ensure the sustainability of my system, well, other people won't adopt this system. So for the value chain to be respectful, we need to make sure that the farmer can continue to produce, that he can strengthen his soil and to create sustainable basis for his value chain. So the experimental farms are there to test the strength of the value chain. In our farms, we have imagined working across 8 years. How can we have the best possible energy review in 8 years? So it's through crop rotation over several years, over several cycles, that will ensure sustainability. In farming, 50% of greenhouse gases is the energy you need to grow. So within your crop rotation of 8 years, if you've had a bit of alfalfa, if you've had a bit of protein crops, if you've, we calculated that through methanizer, we can reduce by 30% the greenhouse gas emissions. So just like this, we've reduced greenhouse gases. How can we ensure that the farm remain carbon neutral, that it produces carbon, that it can stock carbon, and that it can generate energy for the region? I might talk about it later if I still have the opportunity, but the model that we are trying to promote is sharing good values, between agriculture, between industry, and the best possible model is to create contracts between industry and farmers so that both see their interests represented and that this be reflected in the price. Thank you. And now we come back to our markets. So everything has to be financed. There needs to be a good business model. Within this context, Jacobs, yeah, we can also speak. So we're speaking with a Dutchman who's creating a new industrial site in northern France. We often think a lot about creating a new industry because in France it's not really well known for straightforward bureaucracy and quick assessment. So I'm going to speak English so it might be easier for everyone. Yes.
What are we doing in France? Why are we in France? So very quickly, we're building a 5 gigawatt solar module and solar cell factory in France. Our goal is to reindustrialize France and reindustrialize Europe and provide energy sovereignty to Europe, because currently, as we've said earlier, you mentioned the war in Ukraine and the impact that this had on Europe. And I don't know if you all know how many billions of euros we spent in 2022 getting oil and gas into Europe. Anybody? Idea? 900 billion. 900 billion were spent by Europeans to buy oil and gas from non-European countries, so extra-European countries, to provide us with energy. And what we're trying to do is to prevent that with a new industrial revolution that is coming up, the third industrial revolution, which is renewable electricity, that doesn't go from the OPEC, where we spent 2 years ago 900 billion euros, to China, which is today supplying 95% of all the solar panels and batteries and electric cars that come into Europe. So the question is, why did we choose France? And we studied with my group 6 countries in Europe and over 40 sites. And what we needed was a site that was shovel-ready, meaning a large industrial site where we can start pouring concrete as quickly as possible, and where all the authorization process to be able to build a factory are as streamlined as possible. And what France allowed us to do by having this site is to save at least 18 months of processes to have we call in French an étude fond flore, which is minimum 12 months if you have 4 seasons, plus another 6 months to draft a report. And then you need to go through your environmental permits and your building permits, and possibly even your concertation nationale du débat public, where you speak with the local population. So our process will take about 18 months to get all the permits in France, which is faster than other places in Europe that we've found. And what we must realize here is that in Europe we have all these rules, and they're linked to our democracy. What you notice is that in China, if I wanted to do the same thing in China, within 3 months I would have all the authorizations that I would need. And in addition, the local provinces in China would be fighting each other to try to get our factory, and they would actually build the factory for us and ask us to start reimbursing it 5 years down the road. So you must realize at which point our democracy, our willingness to do things according to the rules that protect our environment, which is necessary for the farms and for our water, has a cost. And that's what we call an externality in terms of economics. And what we're hoping to do with the Net Zero Industrial Act is that these externalities, which explain why our costs in Europe are going to be higher than China, because again, what we're doing here in terms of having to look at different pieces of land and having to evaluate what all these things, they take time and they have a cost. And this is why we're able here to have this discussion, because I can guarantee you that these discussions in China would not be possible.
I think that's an encouraging story.
Or if somebody disagreed, not
Please
here
raise
to
your
speak
hand.
very long about it.
Yes, yes. No, and thank you also for linking in the discussion a little bit to a big asset which is not always on the table, but it is democracy, of course, and it is the way we communicate with the people in the country, with the farmers, with people that go to elections in June. We want to all have them on board, and it's very encouraging to hear that such an investment, I think it's around 700 million euros. Sorry, million euros in the Grand Est, in the heart of the Rhine-Meuse region, creating also 1,700 jobs. Yes, that's correct. That it lands among the people, and that there's a new perspective in Europe in that sense. And I think that's a little bit what the Green Deal and Onward is about. It's creating a new future, and it's creating a sustainable future. Mr. Núñez de Almeida, you're responsible not only for the energy part, but also for mobility, something that within the Rhine-Meuse area is very important, but also a very big challenge. The decarbonization of road traffic, for instance, of trucks on the roads is a big ambition, but it's, I think, not even 1% on its way to get, for instance, trucks on hydrogen or on batteries on the road. It's something which we work a lot on within the Benelux Union. You heard from Mr. Lemmer that there's also still some challenges in applying technologies regarding biogas or bioenergy. That is actually already there, it's already financeable, but some rules are in the way. Can you give us maybe a little bit of a look into the near future, so not 2050, but maybe rather 2030, 2040, and where this commission has maybe already created help, and where you see the next big challenges in solving problems?
Well, yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having invited me. Possibly just to situate everybody within the wider framework, there is indeed right now a big debate on to what extent we want to support our net zero industries and be self-sufficient. And as you said before, I mean, between the fully self-sufficient and a bit self-sufficient. The truth of the matter being that if you want to decarbonize fast and cheap without industrial policy considerations, you would buy Chinese products in most of the cases. So if you think, so the option is, you know, we go for the cheapest products available in the world so as to provide to achieve our decarbonization goals as fast as possible and to give our industries a cheaper energy. Or do we see this as a dangerous dependency that has to be avoided? The answer is increasingly leaning towards number two. Now, where does Europe stay? I mean, to give you sort of like a broader overview of where do I see as a strong, or where do I see as having, I mean, clearly the situation on solar PV is pretty bad. We've got 95% of imports from China, and this is compounded by the fact that solar PVs is seen as probably one of the most promising. It is estimated that there would be more of them than wind in the future. I mean, not to say that wind will not play an important role, but I mean, solar seems to be very much of a winner. And we do, I mean, there is a solar alliance existing since a year and some more, but it's clear that we got now to a juncture where we have to think about how to, what needs to be done to protect and give a future to this industry in Europe as a composition possibly of trade defenses and resilience criteria, plus eco-design sustainability rules that we would develop ourselves. We are stronger on wind turbines, I mean, and everything that is to do with the wind value chain. Well, Europe tends to be very good at inventing things, but it's bad at keeping them. So in electrolyzers, it was a bit that story also 2-3 years ago when I started this job. Nobody talked about a Chinese threat on electrolyzers for hydrogen, but now it starts becoming, they start pushing in. The Commission is also launching an alliance to try to garner the support of the small modular reactors industry. I know that for Germany that's an issue, but a lot of Europe is happy to engage with nuclear as a form of decarbonization, and I would think that nuclear and especially novel nuclear technologies will be seen as good as anything else from a decarbonization point of view. On batteries, according to our estimates, we probably managed from nothing to get something like a 10% worldwide market share, which is probably not yet where we would like to be, but it's already a bit more than peanuts. Question, well, I think that if we want to keep these industries and consider these industries as strategic industries, it's very difficult to consider that this will be done without public support, meaning forms of public de-risking. I mean, most of the issues that have been put forward by the previous speakers are risky. They are breakthroughs, they are disruptive. People are afraid to be the first, both from the demand and from the supply side. It's difficult to imagine all this happening just as a result of the carbon market price operation, and that we will be able to do this without significant amounts of public intervention, whether that means new money or existing money redirected to this. But I think that it's clear that Europe, everybody agrees that Europe probably should have an industrial policy, but if we don't have an industrial policy accompanied by a financial arm, what are we talking?
Is it always the case, by the way? Because not so long ago we were at a big energy conference where we had a discussion about so-called cooperative energy investments, where basically the normal civilian could invest in wind farms on land even. Whereas normally there was a lot of protests, objection against creating these parks, having the possibility to take some risk, but nevertheless to also make some money in investing in renewables.
Yeah, that helps.
Really was a Kickstarter to get people on board. And
Yeah. To involve the local communities in getting something out of that. And I also think that we will also have to become a bit more savvy. I mean, what the main novelty of the Net Zero Act, besides the faster permitting, which is important, is the push for resilience criteria on procurement auctions and other forms of public intervention, like subsidies to households, things like obliging single sourcing to be considered as a dangerous zone, that obliges some certain criteria to kick in because you don't want to have single sourcing of more than X%. All these negotiations are being carried out right now, so it's useless that I tell you where we were yesterday, because in 2 days, well, I think that the degree of ambition is still there, but we're clearly working on things like to get some pre-qualification criteria through, and also percentages of auctions and procurement that would have to be covered by resilience criteria in the EU. At least certainly, for instance, like for the solar industry, that is starting from not much, even if you've got a 20-30% procurement or auction biased towards certain criteria, that could give a helping hand. Now, on what the problem, Mr. Lemmer raised the issue of the biofuels versus electrification, if I understood, of the vehicle dimension, if I understood you correctly. So it's the issue of e-fuels as a complement to electrification. I mean, is that the barrier you see, the 2035 being focused on, or did I get you right? I'd be happy to explore your issue anyway.
It's switched on.
So actually the problem is when we are talking about buses, on one side we have the Renewable Energy Directive stating that biomethane made of manure and organic residues has an extremely good energy balance even can be negative if we have a quite high share on manure. On the other side, when we're looking for the Clean Vehicle Directive, and that how it is then given to or übersetzt worden dann in die... Ja, genau. Genau, wie die dann übersetzt wurden in die...
So these directives which have been translated into standards concerning the vehicle mobility. And I must say that a number of vehicles will no longer be considered as being emission-free. After 2030, those cars and those vehicles will no longer be authorized, they will be banned. And so they will continue producing CO2. And in turn, the CO2 is going to be absorbed by plants. But the problem is thus it prevents us from giving a real future to the market, and this is because of these directives.
I think it's. I'm happy to meet you bilaterally to understand the issue. I think I have a sense. I have a sense that I understood, but I think I would need to know a few more details before giving you a fuller answer.
Maybe we can mark the point as I think it's a very nice example of where policy decisions are made to set priorities on certain fuels in this case, but where, as I think well presented before, a ready alternative that is already financeable and on the market is basically stopped by good intentions of the new legislation. And can, let's say, a region or can players like this come to the European Commission and discuss this and bring this back on the table bilaterally? Well, let's keep it. Yeah.
Of course,
yeah?
of course they can.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it's important. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, of course they can. I mean, but just sort of like. The state of knowledge I got was that in e-mobility, in mobility, the e-fuels would all be much more uneconomic and would require of the car industry investments much heavier than electrification. So that would explain why there is a certain bias from the EU via electrification, not because of a preference for a technology, because according to the information we get, besides a series of high-segment, high-value cars, e-fuels are not commercially attractive and so do not appear as making the difference. But if you have a different opinion, I'd be very happy to talk to you bilaterally at a later stage. We're preparing the next commission, and so
that's
herzlich willkommen.
That's a very nice bridge to maybe a next round of well, invitations, questions. You all have your specific fields of activity, but if you could pass on a wish to the next commission that may be from different political background with a different start than the former one, or the current one, I have to say. What would be your key call upon the new European Commission, Mrs. Rocher? That's a big challenge to tick one off.
Well, actually, I was a little bit short in the beginning, even I talked already quite a lot, but actually I didn't really allude to the real question, and there were many points coming up. I would just shortly react if possible.
You are more than welcome.
Because it's then again, it's just to make the big picture of what's sovereignty, what's independence, etc. Well, on the energy side, we will never be completely independent, and we don't really want it when we talk about European cooperation, energy, the internal energy market. I mean, expressively we say we work together. We don't want national autonomy anyways, because this is much more efficient and so for the good for everybody. But we just don't also have complete resources for being completely independent. We have a lot of of gains to have well, again, independence you have to differentiate also in the energy production and energy carriers, but then also on the components. That's what you were alluding to, and when it comes to solar panels, so the machineries to produce it, if you want to say so. So just distinguish a little bit these two issues. And we definitely are on the point that really the energy transition for us in Germany towards renewables makes us already a lot independent, much more independent than we are today. And there are many examples like bioenergy, communities, and small-scale solutions working together being one part, but at the same time we have heavy industry, which still needs also quite a lot of energy resources, so we need a mixture of all these solutions. And so we're not talking about independence. Sovereignty means, in our case, really diversification. This is important, and there we had definitely a big challenge these days now during the crisis. Showed it very much. You should never depend on just one source primarily. So when it comes to just to keep it a little bit shorter, on the question of the components, there again, I mean, we really subscribe completely. This example again showed we can't depend completely on one source, and the solar PV example is really quite a enormously challenging one, and we subscribe as an industry also towards getting more resilience in it, build up the value chains, which means then you have to think along the whole value chain, by the way, and not only the end, but there are many different components coming in on that picture where we should dig deeper into it in the context of the NZIA and the Critical Raw Materials Act. But we really have to think through very cautiously for which technologies and which framework we do what sort of measures. And specifically for the solar industry, I mean, we really have reached enormously during the crisis with accelerating authorization procedures, with building up renewables now only in solar in Germany, 14 gigawatts last year, so 14. I mean, and we want to continue and have to continue, that we don't cut this from one day to the other. And the talks about trade measures in this context, and obviously also some criteria in the Net Zero Industry Act, like the 50% of value not being allowed to come from countries not having subscribed the international pact on, I would say, public procurement, which means China, is then a complete stop immediately. And there we really have to be very cautious, and then obviously also try to strike a really good balance in between in which time frame we can afford which price, because we have this energy price debate. We have to accelerate enormously. We have enormous investments to do in the grids, in the production sites, etc. So we have a real issue spilling over even in a democracy election issue these days about what people are willing to and able to cope with, and how do we structure these policies.
I think Jan Jacob is
there
impatient to react to this.
And then we come
Yes?
to the election in the next legislative period, just to make this also.
Yes.
So we really made enormous bound forwards with the electricity market design reform, with the gas package, with the Fit for 55 package, having ambitious targets. We definitely need in the next period the very soon a long-term vision on what comes for 2040, obviously. We have a big issue on the infrastructure side also. Still, somehow offshore is also a part. We would also dig deeper into it, but in principle, we would really say consolidate, implement, look for really coordinated approach and implementation. And this would be our main plea towards the Commission, not stepping down in ambitions. Don't take me wrong, yeah? But really bringing a lot of. We had a lot of investment and stop or hold back because we just didn't know what will be the rules tomorrow, and this we really have to consolidate.
To say it in short, evolution, not revolution,
yes.
if I get it well. But I see Jan Jacob having an extra component maybe to bring to shed some light in the discussion. Shall we stick to a strict or an ambitious strategic autonomy ambition, or is there maybe a middle way somewhere?
Actually, I think three points I'd like to make: sovereignty, price, and time. The first is sovereignty. Why is sovereignty so important? Is that today, Europe is able to manufacture all it needs here in Europe for solar panels. Our technology that we use, N-type TOPCon, uses no rare earth. I repeat, no rare earths. What we use as a raw material is silicon. Silicon is found in quartz. The Earth's crust is made out of 75% of silicon. It is the second most abundant raw material molecule on Earth after oxygen. So we will never be out of silicon. It is under our feet here in Europe as we speak. So first thing. The second thing is that photovoltaic, so therefore, can be 100% European. Will it become 100% European? Will we supply 100% of our energy today? No, we can't do this today, because it'll take a while to build up our industry. And we have time in front of us. The industry wasn't built overnight. This industry initially was European. Photovoltaics was invented in France in 1836 by a 17-year-old boy. It's been here for quite a while. All we're doing right now is improving. And as you mentioned, there are fantastic research institutes in Europe, and you're absolutely right. We're incapable of keeping our technologies here. They all go abroad, either to the States or to China. And right now, the technology that is being rolled out in China, called N-type TOPCon, was actually invented by 4 Europeans. And we've actually hired one of them as a CTO. So is it possible to do it here in Europe? The answer is yes, it is. And as you mentioned, it needs help and support from Europe. People, it's very simple. We can do 2 things. We can either continue to think in the old process of saying, every week I'm going to fill up my car with diesel and gasoline that comes from outside of Europe. Or I can invest, let's keep it simple, a solar system for my own house, and at night or during the day, I can recharge my car, and within 7 years, that solar system is paid off. And for the next 20 years, you will be driving your car at electricity that you have generated for free. What would you rather do? Continue to pay every single time? The answer is no, of course. You want to be self-sufficient. Now, the problem that we have is that right now, China saw this, and they saw this very well. And China wants to become the new OPEC. It's that simple. We've had OPEC since the 1970s that have been putting Europe through tremendous economic crisis, and since 1970s, our entire industry has collapsed, and most industries have left Europe, and now we have the 3rd industrial revolution. And hear my words, it's going to go very fast, very, very fast. And so we have the choice today to either say we participate and we take our share of this renewable industry, which is going to be new cars, new batteries, new energy systems, or we decide to say we let it be done by somebody else, China, because it's a cheaper option. But my firm belief as an economist is that if we miss the 3rd industrial revolution, and we've missed the 2nd one because Europe has no oil and gas to speak of anymore, if we miss the 3rd industrial revolution, my personal belief is that Europe will be a third world nation in 20 to 30 years. And there will be no jobs for my kids, and Europe will be essentially a Disneyland. And that's what I think we need to fight against. So will we in the beginning be more expensive than China? Yes. We will always be more expensive than China because China has made a policy to take over this market. I'm not being anti-Chinese. I work for a Chinese company. I've got many Chinese friends. I'm just stating a fact. They don't have a democracy. They have essentially one leader who's saying, this is the direction I'm going to go into. And by the way, they're very smart to say this. They want to become the new generation of all the automobiles, all the batteries that are within it, and all the solar panels that will generate electricity. Why solar panels? Because solar panels are the cheapest way to electrify our industry. Even France, with all their nuclear power plants, admit it. They say to be able to go through the dip of our old nuclear power plants that are now being replaced by new power plants, which will take at least 15 years, the only way to do it is solar panels because they're easy to deploy in a quick way. Much quicker than putting in windmills because nobody wants them in their background and it takes you 10 years to do a wind farm. Solar panels, nobody sees them, right? So this is why it is so important that we work together with the European Union, and luckily the European Union understands this and sees the vision that yes, it will require investments, everything does, and it will require rules. And that is what we can do. The European Union must create the rules that are necessary to be able to protect the European industries for a while, right? But China will every single time try to match whatever step that the European Union will do because they want this market. Again, Europe is the second largest market for photovoltaics after China. The Net Zero Industrial Act asks that 40% of the solar panels by 2030 will be made in Europe. That still leaves 60% of the market for China. It's a big market for China. And so I believe that we can cooperate with China and that China will allow Europe to develop at least 40% of its industry. And we need to find out in which niches we're going to develop and hopefully encourage European-made products. But I think that is what's necessary to provide us with this resilience. Again, the sovereignty is important because you must realize that a solar panel is essentially a product that generates electricity. It then goes, this electricity goes to an inverter. The inverter is able to transform the DC electricity into AC electricity that comes out of the plug in the wall. The problem is that those machines are controlled at a distance. My supplier will tell me, hey, Mr. Boom, your system is not, your inverter is not working very well. There's something happening with your solar panels. If they monitor the systems, they can also switch them off at a distance, which means that our resiliency that we have here in Europe, if we use only Chinese equipment, is zero, because if we get into a conflict with China, they can switch them off. It's as if they could switch off the nuclear power plants.
Maybe I stop you there, because otherwise we'll believe that we'll be returning to Disneyland when we go back to Grand Est, which is not the case. But thank you, because it sets it very clear. Huh? There is a concern and an opportunity at the same time. Maybe if I can go back to you, Maximine. It was very inspiring, your first story. Farmers are independent entrepreneurs, and big farms are, in that sense, also very interesting test labs. Could you react a little bit to, let's say, the rather worrying comments from the previous speaker, and tell us about maybe the projects on not only the farm you described, but on other farms, which are the agricultural sector bringing forward in the Grand Est, and which maybe also the regions around Baden-Württemberg, but also the Benelux countries, can learn from?
I think that what we just talked about, sovereignty, is true for food, especially for food. And we saw it through the recent crises and wars. This sovereignty, our food sovereignty, we can achieve it through an energy sovereignty. If you don't have any nitrogen to produce food, well, you can't have food sovereignty. Agriculture has a real opportunity, because through a solar panel, I mean, agriculture is a solar panel, a natural solar panel. It doesn't cost anything. You just need to let plants grow, and it can capture carbon. So it's even better than the solar panel, because the energy we can create through biomass captures carbon. The added value is incredible. But you asked us what kind of proposition can you make at the Commission. We talked about having fallow land, 4%, or having certain types of measures for agriculture. The Commission is going to say we need photovoltaic, but perhaps you should stop producing on all your land. So farmers today, well, they don't really know what's what, because they're being told, don't produce too much. You're going to have too much impact on the environment. But what happens, in essence, we import 30% of Chinese products, of energy. Life is energy. It's exactly the same domain. What can we do of our natural solar panel? And today, agriculture has been put to one side. You're just responsible for our food, but in reality, what I'm explaining is if I can create energy, I can bring resilience to my farm. And we really need to decompartmentalize agriculture. Europe needs an energy mix. In electricity, yes. But why would my tractor not be a bioethanol or biogas tractor? Why would the bus not be a bioethanol bus? Because we need resilient territories using local resources, and an energy mix is necessary, and that is my big issue with the Commission, because the Commission is trying to create these silos of different competences. I'm an agriculturer and I've got the solutions for you.
C'est le mot clé.
So decompartmentalizing this is really the key concept here. So yeah, it's a very nice vision you have there for us.
I think there's also a special clause on promoting cross-border pilot projects. This is a region where borders exist, but they are actually by default also passed. You talked about linking the several policies. How does Europe make it, let's say, the threshold as low as possible for innovations from the field, from the regions? And how do you make it attractive for regions like the Rhine-Meuse area or the Benelux, or there's also a pentalateral area where the Germany, France, the Benelux countries and Switzerland work closely together on energy. How do you invite them, convince them, and actually make sure that projects go and start, even though there are borders, because it is still an issue?
Okay, look, I'll try to be brief because otherwise, the IPCEI comes to mind. I mean, the important project of common European interest, which is cross-border, transnational by nature, and it's a series of member states putting projects together state aid projects together to the European Commission to get a state aid blessing, and there's a clearly cross-border dimension there that you could think about. The Critical Raw Materials Act also bases itself on the idea of strategic projects that can clearly be transnational, that would be submitted to a board chaired by the Commission to get the label strategic, which allows them to get faster permitting at national level, significantly faster. The Net Zero Industry Act also bases itself on the concept of a project within certain characteristics would have faster permitting, but there the decision would be taken at national level for decentralization reasons, because it would be difficult for us to process all that. And also don't forget that you've got the Innovation Fund with the proceeds of the ETS, which is possibly the most tangible way the European Commission now has to support the decarbonization of industry. We're talking about 30 billion euro from here to 2030, managed by DG Klima, cooperation with us and others on. It's a competitive process, so it's not as good as the IRA that you fit into a pigeonhole and you get the subsidy. You have to bid, and you can get it or not. I think I'll stop here, but I would definitely encourage you to. I'm very encouraged when you hear these panels and see all the interesting things that are going ahead. I mean, there's plenty of doom and gloom around, so it's also good to hear that But actually, I mean, that's one. I mean, I've been 2 or 3 years in this job, 3 nearly, in March, and one thing that always surprises me is the optimism of European industry. Surprisingly so. I mean, most people come to my office to tell me about the great things that they're doing, much more than about how bad life is, which, you know, makes you happier to.
So it's not all Disneyland after all. One comment which triggered me, you said it's not as good as IRA from the US. I would have asked this question to Mrs. Han from the Parliament, but while you're here, what can we learn from this IRA Act?
Well, I'm not an expert of what's going on there. I think that I get increasingly echoes that people make I mean, I think that the facility of the IRA, of what all businesses said when the IRA came, is that if you fit a certain type, you do certain things, you are in a certain configuration, you automatically get a subsidy, a tax exemption. Whereas in Europe, you have to claim, you have to do the paperwork, you have to demonstrate that you're in certain situations, you have to compete. And why? I mean, the reasons are very clear. I mean, even if you looked at me and said, do an IRA, I mean, it's a great thing, why don't you do an IRA? We haven't got an EU budget that is anything like the American federal budget, so we wouldn't have the power to do that. And that's not going to change from one day to the other.
Okay, thank you. You want to react?
Very quickly about the IRA. The IRA is extremely simply built for our industry. If I produce a solar panel, if I produce a solar cell, I will get X cents for every single product produced. So it is an extremely simple system. Frankly, I think the system is too rich. Cash, it's too rich. I think we need to do something that encourages people who want to be competitive in the long run. But it is an extremely simple system. And the United States did it not to spite Europe, they did it to protect the United States. Yeah. And they said, we need security in 3 things. We need security in energy, so help develop a solar industry. We need security in semiconductors, so help support and create a US semiconductor industry to repatriate it from Taiwan to the States, and same with medicine. That's it, boom. But they created something extremely simple. And as you mentioned, it means that today an enormous amount of companies have set up businesses in the States to be able to manufacture over there. And they solved their renewable energy problem very, very quickly.
That's a clear statement. I look to the room. Is there anybody wanting to ask a question? I, of course, surprise you a little bit with this. The lights go on. If nobody raises his hand, then I would like to ask the panel to maybe share with them their optimal, let's say, future. If in 5 years we meet here again on this panel, in which situation would you be, let's say, satisfied with how policy have been made, how your project has developed, or how your members have actually realized their project? Can I start with you, Mrs. Rocher? 2 minutes maximum.
2 minutes, whoa. Well, yeah, first of all, definitely that the real implementation of the European rules are set in place, which means delegated act, implementing act, national implementation, specifically for the ramp up of the hydrogen market. We still very much believe in it. There are many talks about, is it too enthusiastic or not? There's a lot of HANAC issue, and we are just about putting in place really the cornerstones, which allows us then to have seeing more clearly. So having this in place and the business up and running. Digitization of the German administration. And also some more stuff for the authorization procedures. We gained a lot, really tremendously during the crisis also, so we are able to do so. Why shouldn't we continue? So having this streamlined. and really having resolved a couple of bottlenecks when it comes to the infrastructure build-up. That's really, really crucial. And then really continue talking and cooperating cross-border in the internal energy market, but also in the energy union in general, because the tendency towards more national approaches will not help us at all. Well, this is really from the energy side, the most important ones for us. Obviously, for Germany, it's renewables, and therefore we very much hope that these solutions all around comes really to a point that we find ways in reducing the costs of implementing this as much as possible. We have always been high energy regions in the general international global competition race, but things like really skilled labor, good infrastructure, and still a big market is something which will help us over these issues. So this we really have to. We have very, very strong issues also on this, and this we also have to overcome. Yeah.
After all, quite a list. Yes. From the bioenergy point of view, Mr. Lemmer.
Ja, ich möchte die Frage ein bisschen an.
I would like to answer the question a little differently. We have talked a lot about limitations. The fact that we are energy dependent, there are limitations in the finance sector, but there's one issue on which we do not have any limitation, and that is intelligence. I'm privileged in my work that I work with incredibly intelligent young scientists. This morning we talked about the death valley of innovation, that a lot of innovations do not find their way onto the market. And up until now, it was often the issue that there wasn't enough possibility in the production chain. But when I work with startups, we realize that the problem that is hampering our innovation is bureaucracy and technical requirements. For a company to bring a new product on the market, it costs a lot of money and a lot of time. And that's exactly what startups do not have. We need to find possibilities to allow young, new companies to bring upon our markets new products without destroying their viability. We need flexibility, we need innovative companies that bring new fluxes and new energies within the different sectors we're talking about, within food, within energy, within the other sectors. For the moment, we are trying to conserve the status quo. Large companies can answer all the requirements, but this is just cementing the status quo. We need innovation, we need agility, we need flexibility and innovation. Yes, thank you very much. So that's a very positive call. Mr. Charpentier, it's exactly what you just explained. There is a living lab in agriculture in your domain, so what do you want to add? So I share your enthusiasm. I think that we need to nurture this enthusiasm, security, sovereignty, to be proud of one's territory. All this is important. For people to achieve their potential, they need to make sense of their lives. Europe has to make sense to them. And sometimes, like our president in France, we've tried to do everything at the same time. We've wanted to help agriculture and at the same time signing the Mercosur agreement and putting in place the European Green Deal. I think sometimes it's complicated to do all these things at the same time. Europe needs to unravel the energies that exist, the energies and the people, the intelligences that exist in Europe, and be proud of our knowledge, of our skills. The revolution that you were talking about, it's not a technological revolution, because on our planet, everyone has access to energy, but it's more an organizational revolution. How can we create meaning for people within a region? How can they reach well-being? And I think Europe really needs to ask a few hard questions in that domain, because I'll be quite frank with you, I'm a farmer, I'm very close to all the people that are demonstrating currently. There is a real disarray within the farming community, and please listen to this call, please do. Thank you.
So for me, in 5 years' time, my hope, my wish, but I think we'll get there, is that what we're working on right now for the measures to redevelop renewable energies and reindustrialize Europe, and namely with the Net Zero Industrial Act, will have come through in such a way that 40% of the solar panels manufactured in Europe will be made by European companies here in Europe. It is completely doable. It is completely possible. What we need is regulations, rules. And these rules must be made in a watertight way. For instance, we can go into detail. I'll be very happy to have a discussion with you about those. But we must make sure that these rules cannot be bent, so that other nations, for instance China, could actually sneak through and still be able to try to sell products here that have been made in China. There are many rules that we can use. We have to use the rules that make us different. It's the European society, the European laws, right? Which I can guarantee you China doesn't respect. The impact will be that we will have an industry that is self-sufficient, that is resilient. We have, again, I said, we have everything we need over here. And the last point I want to make is, when I didn't finish earlier, is price, cost to our society. The difference in price between using a solar panel that is made in Europe versus a solar panel made in China, for the end price to the end consumer, in terms of the price of the kilowatt hour that comes from this plug, is minimal. It is really minimal. And we must be able to say, in order to guarantee our sovereignty, our security, and we won't be able to do 100% of it in the beginning, but from a small part, we must be able to create the rules so that that electricity can be sold in Europe. And yes, it'll be a tiny bit more expensive, but if we explain it properly to the population, they'll say, yeah, you know what, this makes sense. It makes sense. I'm ready to pay a bit more. And I know our investors, we already have 2.5 gigawatts of letters of intent from players here in Europe who say, we want to buy your products made in Europe. If we create the rules, again, this is what we need, the legislation. This is what we're asking of Europe. Create the rules. We will do the business, create the rules. And the analogy I want to make is, look at the European battery industry. 4 years ago, had somebody come saying, I want to build batteries in Europe for automobiles, people have said, you're crazy. This is not going to be possible. It's all been over to China. What has happened 4 years later is that you've got Northvolt in Sweden, you've got Verkor in France, you've got ACC in France and in Germany. So if we create the rules, we can build the industry that we need to participate in the third industrial revolution and to have this new society, this third industrial revolution, the society that we're talking about here. So thank you.
Mr. Nunez, do you want to receive the fierté and the enthusiasm to make the best also under the next commission?
Non, voilà, j'ai beaucoup aimé votre libérer des.
I really enjoyed this comment of unraveling different energies in society, of unchaining rather these energies. There are too many rules. It's too complicated. We often hear this. But from a very practical point of view, you asked me basically if you could have your Santa list for the next Commission. If we can already reach 40% of net zero products from Europe, that would already be quite amazing. I would already be quite satisfied with that result. If we could achieve that target in our net zero objective. And I'm really counting on all of you, but you can also count on us.
We've got, I think, the people, the means, the minds, and the motivation to make it happen, and lots of good examples where things are already happening. I asked what shall be there in 5 years or 10 years. If this solar factory is opening, I would love to go see it, and I'm sure that people here would love to come see it. And the same with your farm, which has all these innovations. I would say get the people to see it in real life, and I would like to thank the panel, and I would invite you for a warm round of applause.